Alright, to start this video, I present to you this riddle. I'm a man. I'm a nationalist. I also believe in the nationalization of industries, although I do allow for some private ownership of some businesses. I also encourage expansionism, whether it's borders or culture. I also believe that certain races are superior to others and inferior people should either be subdued or removed. Who am I? Now you might be thinking this sounds a lot like a certain German dictator, but you'd be wrong, because this person is actually Mao Zedong. Or maybe it's Joseph Stalin. Maybe it's Che Guevara, or maybe it's good old Adolf Hitler. But there is something wrong here. These people are socialists, but this guy is fascist. Why exactly is that? All my life I always learned that there are two sides to the political landscape, the left and the right. And at the furthest end of the left wing, you have communism, socialism, call it what you like, there's very little difference in the two. And then at the other end, you have fascism. But after looking at the doctrines of fascism, reading on its history and application, this couldn't be further from the truth. Fascism is not actually as right-wing as you might think. But what exactly is fascism and what is its relationship with socialism? Socialism is an ideology that advocates for the means of production, distribution, and exchange being controlled by the society. Fascism is basically the same thing, except the state replaces society and nationalism becomes its backbone. If you look up the definition of fascism on Google right now, what you get is complete nonsense. Like, this definition could not be further from the truth. But then you see it comes from Wikipedia and then you're like, of course it does. Wikipedia attempts to define fascism completely based on its historic implementations rather than its actual doctrine, which is funny because if we define socialism based on its historic implementations, this definition fits exactly. Just replace the word far right with far left and there you have it. Perfectly described communist China, Cuba, or the USSR. To understand fascism, we need to understand the ideology behind its creation. Most people think that Benito Mussolini created fascism as he was the world's first ever fascist dictator. This mistake is so common that even oversimplified, one of my most favorite YouTube channels and a major inspiration for me made this same mistake. And you know what? I don't blame him. If I hadn't watched some obscure YouTube video a few years ago, I would have made the same mistake as well. The creator of fascism is this guy, Giovanni Gentile, a figure whose complete obscurity and invisibility in the historical papers is absolutely wild to me. With the amount of people throwing the word fascist around, you'd think that many of them would actually care to know where it actually came from. But I think there lies the problem. Fascist is usually used as a term to vilify right-wingers by left-wingers. So if these guys found out that fascism was actually an offshoot of socialism created by socialists, they might not be so thrilled. Speaking of socialists, yes, Giovanni Gentile was indeed a socialist. He hated the capitalist system because he thought it was too liberal, individualistic, and thus far too selfish. But he also hated socialism because he felt it was too impractical and unrealistic. Actual socialism requires a level of anarchy for the means of production to actually be controlled by the people, a level of anarchy he did not believe could be realistically implemented. So instead, he created the doctrine of fascism whereby power will be handed over to the people's representative arm, aka the government, which was, of course, the state, whose power was held up by intense nationalism. That's why the Wikipedia definition annoys me so much, because fun fact, right, a very common misconception, fascism is not inherently dictatorial or non-democratic. The people were supposed to willingly submit themselves to the state after all. This state might be elected or it might not be, just like how socialist governments don't have to be dictatorships. The fact that basically all socialist governments end up being dictatorships doesn't mean that socialism itself advocates for autocracy. This is why socialism always inevitably evolves into fascism, because just like Gentile believed, it is the only real way that socialism can actually be implemented in society. Most socialist governments are formed on the backbone of revolutions or great amounts of economic and social turmoil. The socialist government they create would end up taking all of the power for themselves and promoting nationalism as a way to justify the regime's actions. That's why Hitler, who never actually identified as a fascist but as a socialist, was actually a fascist in his doctrines and his beliefs. In fact, most prominent fascists today actually used to identify as socialists. Hitler, yup. Mussolini, yup. Gentile, yup. And just like these people, other socialist leaders and governments eventually became fascist in every way but name. Just look at modern day China. State sponsored nationalism? Check. Intense militarization? Check. Government control over the means of production, distribution, and exchange? Check. Permission of some private property which is heavily controlled by the state? Check. Hell, you can even toss in other stuff like disregard for free press, expansionism, and the systematic elimination of problematic groups. I mean, just look at this scenario. Hello there, my friend. Say, you look like a dictator. Of course I am. As we both know, people need to be ruled. Yes, absolutely. Tell me, what country do you rule over? The Great China. Ho ho! Ching chong ding dong, right? Uh, that's not even remotely funny. You're right. Of course. See, we got off on the wrong foot. How about we discuss the things that we both agree on? Oh, okay. So I like nationalizing industries. Me too. But I do allow for some private business. If they're under intense government supervision. Ah, that sounds great. I'm guessing you're also a huge fan of military armament and reconquest of lost territory. Ha! Pathetic that you even recognize the independence of a renegade state. For me, anything that used to be part of us will be returned. Huh. So I'm guessing you're not a fan of free press. Like, what even is free press? It doesn't exist. All press is biased, so why can't they just be biased for the benefit of the state? Because the state exists on behalf of the people. So when the media goes against the state, they go against the people and must be brought to heel or destroyed. Wow. Are you sure you're not my secret son? I don't think so. Yeah, you're right. You're far too yellow. Huh. Thanks a lot. Alright, since we have literally agreed on everything thus far, I'm sure you share my hatred for the ugly, filthy, disgusting, borderline subhuman creatures called Jews. For me, it's Muslim Uyghurs, but I definitely see where you're coming from. So, how do you justify all of these actions? Through nationalism, of course. Yup, that comes first. The people exist for the good and survival of the nation, and everything we do is all for the sake of the nation and thus the people. Oh boy, all you have to do is cause another world war and we will literally be the same person. Haha, good thing we're both socialists, right? Wait, I thought you were a communist. I thought you were a fascist. It's funny how we still pretend they're not basically the same thing. One final thing I want to talk about is racism, a belief almost exclusively associated with the right wing. So much so that a lot of people consider the more right wing you are as the more racist you are, which couldn't be further from the truth. Because so many left wing and socialist beliefs were created on the backbone of racism by racists and implemented to high degrees of racism. Let's start with the big guy, Karl Marx. He was very racist. He did not like black people or Negroes as he called us. Although I don't blame him for that. Negroes is not really a racist word and everyone called black people Negroes back then, even other black people. But one group of people that Karl Marx really hated were Jews. Like, they were almost cartoonishly evil to him. The embodiment of capitalism, you know, the stereotypical upperclassman with the suit, monocle, top hat, and cane. Yeah, that's basically what Karl Marx saw Jews as. They were the evil proponents of capitalism and thus enemies of the people. Now, Che Guevara. Yup, very racist, not a fan of black people. He thought they were lazy and stupid. Then you go to Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong, people who engaged in systematic genocide of people groups to weaken their place in society, in the case of Stalin and in the case of Mao, to integrate them or eliminate them from said society. A trend that continues till this day in China, which is one of the most notoriously racist places in Asia, with actual systemic racism and open discrimination against its many ethnic minorities, which so many people around the world don't even know exists. And the Chinese socialist government love it that way. They love that when people think of China, they don't think of this or this or this or this. No, they see this and only this. And they're trying their best to ensure that this and this alone becomes China's only reality. Even in Africa, socialism was fueled by ethnic discrimination and the mass murder of minority ethnic groups like in Ethiopia, Congo, Rwanda, Zimbabwe. So yeah, as you can see, socialism has a very long history of racism, authoritarianism, and nationalism. Basically, the history of socialism is the history of fascism. In my opinion, the furthest part of the right wing of the political spectrum should not be fascism, but rather theocracy. Because you really can't get more conservative than a religious government. Religions are meant to be static throughout their history, because if a religion can change, that means it's not absolute, and if it's not absolute, then it's probably definitely fake. So a straight up theocracy is probably going to be the most right-wing government of them all. So that's it. That's why most socialist states are actually fascist or eventually become fascist, and the difference between fascist dictators like Hitler and Mussolini to communist dictators like Stalin or Mao Zedong are very few and in between, if any. So that's it for this video, guys. I know this one might spark a lot of political debates, so if you know something you think I missed, please let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. These videos take a long time to make and I do it all myself, so I would really appreciate your support. Please ring that notification bell, otherwise YouTube might not show you when I release a new video. And if you have any fascist friends plotting their domination of the universe, you can share this video with them. Who knows? They might just come out as socialists. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.